The day Alan Turing realized the human mind could be reprogrammed is not a moment that appears in any history book, not because it did not happen, but because it happened in the quiet spaces between his thoughts, in the margins of his notebooks, in the conversations he had with himself while walking through the English countryside. This is the story of how one of the greatest minds of the 20th century came to understand something that would fundamentally alter how we think about thinking itself. It is a story about logic, about the limits of computation, about what separates a machine from a human being, and ultimately about the terrifying possibility that there might be no separation at all. When we talk about reprogramming the human mind, we are not talking about science fiction or some distant future technology. We are talking about something far more immediate, far more personal, and far more unsettling. We are talking about the idea that your thoughts, your beliefs, your very sense of self might operate according to principles that are not fundamentally different from the principles that govern a machine. This realization did not come to Turing in a moment of dramatic revelation. It came slowly, methodically, the way all truly dangerous ideas arrive in the minds of brilliant people. It came through rigorous thinking, through the careful examination of what it means to compute, what it means to think, and whether there is any meaningful difference between the two. You probably grew up believing that your mind is something sacred, something uniquely yours, something that cannot be reduced to mere mechanism. Your thoughts feel free. Your decisions feel like they come from some essential core of who you are. But what if that feeling is itself a kind of illusion, a story your brain tells itself to maintain the sense of agency and autonomy that keeps you functioning? What if every choice you make, every preference you hold, every conviction you defend can be traced back to a logical structure, a pattern, an algorithm that could theoretically be identified, understood, and altered? This is not a comfortable thought. This is the kind of thought that keeps you awake at night, that makes you question the foundations of everything you believe about yourself. But this is precisely the kind of thought that consumed Alan Turing in the years leading up to his greatest insights. He was not interested in comfortable thoughts. He was interested in true thoughts, in thoughts that could withstand the most rigorous scrutiny, in thoughts that did not depend on intuition or tradition or the way things had always been understood. He was interested in the architecture of thought itself, in the fundamental operations that underlie all computation, all logic, all reasoning. And what he discovered was both revolutionary and deeply troubling. He discovered that the human mind, for all its apparent complexity and mystery, operates according to principles that are not fundamentally different from the principles that govern a machine. This discovery did not come from studying the brain directly. It came from studying the nature of computation itself, from asking the most basic question that a mathematician can ask: what can be computed? In the 1930s, mathematics was in crisis. The foundations of the discipline were crumbling. Kurt Gödel had just published his incompleteness theorems, which demonstrated that any consistent formal system powerful enough to describe arithmetic must contain statements that are true but unprovable within that system. This was devastating. It meant that mathematics, the most rigorous and certain of all human endeavors, had fundamental limits. It meant that there were truths that could never be proven, questions that could never be answered through pure logic. In the wake of this crisis, mathematicians began to ask a new question. If there are limits to what can be proven, are there also limits to what can be computed? This question had been posed by David Hilbert in 1928 as part of what he called the Entscheidungsproblem, the decision problem. Hilbert asked whether there exists a mechanical procedure, an algorithm, that could determine whether any given mathematical statement is true or false. It was a question about the limits of mechanical reasoning, about whether a machine could, in principle, solve any problem that a human mathematician could solve. Alan Turing approached this question not by trying to build a machine, but by imagining one. He created what we now call the Turing machine, a theoretical device of stunning simplicity. Imagine an infinitely long tape divided into squares. Each square can contain a symbol, typically a 0 or a 1. The machine has a read-write head that can move along the tape, reading symbols, writing symbols, and erasing symbols according to a set of instructions. The machine has a finite number of internal states, and based on the current state and the symbol it reads, it follows a specific instruction. Move left, move right, write a symbol, erase a symbol, or halt. That is all. That is the entire mechanism. And yet, Turing proved that any computation that can be performed by any machine, no matter how complex, can be performed by this simple device. This was the Church-Turing thesis, and it remains one of the most profound insights in the history of mathematics and computer science. But here is where the story becomes personal, where it becomes about Turing himself and about the moment when he realized something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. If a Turing machine can compute anything that is computable, and if the human mind performs computations, then the human mind is, in some fundamental sense, a Turing machine. This does not mean that the human brain is literally a Turing machine. The brain is far more complex, far more interconnected, far more mysterious than any machine we have ever built. But it does mean that the operations the brain performs, the computations it carries out, are not fundamentally different in kind from the operations that a machine performs. They are different in degree, perhaps vastly different in degree, but not in kind. This realization came to Turing gradually as he worked on the Entscheidungs problem. He proved that there are problems that no Turing machine can solve, problems that are uncomputable. The most famous of these is the halting problem. Given any program and any input, can you determine whether that program will eventually halt, or whether it will run forever? Turing proved that no algorithm can solve this problem for all possible programs and inputs. There is no mechanical procedure that can answer this question in every case. This was a profound discovery about the limits of computation, but it was also a discovery about the limits of the human mind. If the human mind is a computational system, then there are problems that the human mind cannot solve either. There are questions that no amount of thinking, no amount of reasoning, no amount of effort can answer. The human mind, like any Turing machine, has fundamental limits. Now, you might be wondering what this has to do with reprogramming the human mind. The connection becomes clear when you understand what Turing meant by computation. Computation is not just arithmetic. Computation is any process that can be broken down into a sequence of discrete mechanical steps. Thinking is a process. Reasoning is a process. Decision-making is a process. Emotion, in some sense, is a process. All of these can be broken down into sequences of steps, into algorithms. And if they can be broken down into algorithms, then they can, in principle, be modified, altered, reprogrammed. This is not to say that reprogramming the human mind is easy. It is not. The human brain is incomprehensibly complex. It contains roughly 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of other neurons, forming networks of staggering intricacy. But complexity is not the same as mystery. Complexity is not the same as being beyond the reach of understanding and modification. A computer program can be incredibly complex, containing millions of lines of code, and yet it can still be debugged, modified, and reprogrammed. The same principle applies to the human mind. The fact that it is complex does not mean it is not, in principle, subject to the same kinds of modifications that we apply to machines. Turing understood this, and it troubled him deeply. He understood that if the mind is a computational system, then it is subject to the same kinds of constraints and possibilities as any computational system. It can be programmed. It can be reprogrammed. It can be hacked. It can be corrupted. It can be optimized. It can be constrained. It can be liberated. The implications of this realization are staggering. If your mind can be reprogrammed, then what does it mean to be you? What does it mean to have free will? What does it mean to have a self? These are not merely abstract philosophical questions. They are questions that go to the heart of human identity and human dignity. They are questions that Turing grappled with throughout his life, and they are questions that we, as a civilization, are only beginning to confront seriously. Consider the practical implications. If the human mind operates according to computational principles, then it should be possible, in principle, to identify the algorithms that underlie human behavior, human thought, human emotion. And if you can identify an algorithm, you can modify it, you can optimize it, you can replace it with a different algorithm. This is already happening, though we do not always recognize it as such. When you are exposed to advertising, you are being subjected to a systematic attempt to reprogram your preferences, your desires, your choices. When you use social media, you are interacting with algorithms designed to modify your behavior, to keep you engaged, to shape your attention. When you receive education, you are being programmed with knowledge, with skills, with ways of thinking. When you are subjected to propaganda, you are being reprogrammed at a fundamental level, your beliefs and values being systematically altered. All of these are forms of reprogramming. They are all attempts to modify the algorithms that underlie human thought and behavior. And they work. They work because the human mind is, in fact, a computational system, subject to the same kinds of modifications as any other computational system. But there is something else that Turing understood, something that makes this story even more profound. He understood that reprogramming the human mind is not something that happens only to us from the outside. We reprogram ourselves. We do it constantly. Every time you learn something new, you are reprogramming your mind. Every time you change your mind about something, you are reprogramming your mind. Every time you develop a new habit or break an old one, you are reprogramming your mind. Every time you meditate, every time you exercise, every time you engage in any form of deliberate practice, you are reprogramming your mind. The human mind is not a fixed thing. It is not a static program that runs the same way every time. It is a dynamic system, constantly being modified, constantly being updated, constantly being reprogrammed by experience, by learning, by deliberate effort. This is actually good news. It means that you are not trapped by your current programming. It means that you can change. It means that you can grow. It means that you can become something different from what you are now. But it also means that you are vulnerable. It means that others can reprogram you. It means that you can be manipulated, controlled, and constrained by those who understand the algorithms that underlie your thinking. Turing came to this realization in the context of his work on artificial intelligence. He was trying to answer the question, can a machine think? And his answer was subtle and profound. He said that the question itself is not well defined. We do not have a clear definition of what it means to think. So instead of asking whether a machine can think, we should ask whether a machine can behave in a way that is indistinguishable from a human being. This is what he called the imitation game, what we now know as the Turing test. A machine passes the test if a human interrogator, communicating with both a human and a machine through a text interface, cannot determine which is which. If a machine can pass this test, then, for all practical purposes, it can think. But here's the crucial insight. If a machine can pass the Turing test by imitating human behavior, then human behavior itself must be imitable. It must be reproducible. It must be computable. It must be programmable. This means that human thought, human reasoning, human emotion, all of the things that we consider most essentially human, are, in principle, subject to the same kinds of analysis and modification as any machine process. This realization led Turing to think deeply about the nature of human consciousness and human identity. He began to explore the idea that consciousness itself might be a kind of computation, that the subjective experience of being a self, of having thoughts and feelings, might emerge from the execution of certain algorithms. He was not saying that consciousness is nothing but computation. He was saying that consciousness might be a particular kind of computation, a particular way of organizing and processing information. And if that is true, then consciousness could, in principle, be replicated, transferred, modified, or even copied. These ideas were far ahead of their time. In the 1950s, when Turing was developing these ideas, the very notion of artificial intelligence was considered absurd by most of the scientific establishment. The idea that a machine could think, that a machine could be conscious, that a machine could have subjective experiences was dismissed as impossible, as a violation of something sacred about human nature. But Turing was not deterred by this dismissal. He continued to develop his ideas, to explore the implications of the Church-Turing thesis, to push the boundaries of what was considered possible. And then, in 1954, at the age of 41, Alan Turing died. The official cause was cyanide poisoning, ruled as suicide, but the circumstances were ambiguous, and the truth of what happened remains unclear. What is clear is that Turing had been subjected to chemical castration by the British government as punishment for his homosexuality. He had been humiliated, persecuted, and broken by a society that could not tolerate his difference. He had been, in a very real sense, reprogrammed by force, subjected to a systematic attempt to alter his fundamental nature, to make him conform to the expectations of a society that despised him, and it destroyed him. This is the final tragic irony of Turing's life. The man who understood better than anyone that the human mind could be reprogrammed, who understood the mechanisms by which this reprogramming could occur, who understood the implications of this reprogramming for human freedom and human dignity, was himself subjected to the most brutal form of reprogramming. He was forced to undergo a chemical procedure designed to suppress his sexuality, to alter his fundamental nature, to make him into something he was not. And when that failed, when he refused to be reprogrammed, when he insisted on being himself despite the cost, society destroyed him. This is the day that Alan Turing realized the human mind could be reprogrammed. It was not a single day. It was a process that unfolded over years. Through his mathematical work, through his thinking about artificial intelligence, through his exploration of the nature of computation and consciousness. And it was a realization that came with a terrible cost, because once you understand that the human mind can be reprogrammed, you cannot help but see the ways in which this reprogramming is happening all around you. You cannot help but see the ways in which you yourself are being reprogrammed, the ways in which your thoughts and beliefs and desires are being shaped by forces outside your control. You cannot help but see the vulnerability of human consciousness, the fragility of human freedom, the precariousness of human identity. And you cannot help but wonder whether the solution is to resist this reprogramming, to try to maintain some kind of authentic self in the face of constant pressure to conform, or whether the solution is to embrace it, to take control of your own reprogramming, to deliberately modify your own algorithms in pursuit of growth and improvement. This is the question that Turing left us with. This is the question that we must answer for ourselves. This is the day that Alan Turing realized the human mind could be reprogrammed. It was not a single day. It was a process that unfolded over years through his mathematical work, through his thinking about artificial intelligence, through his exploration of the nature of computation and consciousness. And it was a realization that came with a terrible cost, because once you understand that the human mind can be reprogrammed, you cannot help but see the ways in which this reprogramming is happening all around you. You cannot help but see the ways in which you yourself are being reprogrammed, the ways in which your thoughts and beliefs and desires are being shaped by forces outside your control. You cannot help but see the vulnerability of human consciousness, the fragility of human freedom, the precariousness of human identity. And you cannot help but wonder whether the solution is to resist this reprogramming, to try to maintain some kind of authentic self in the face of constant pressure to conform, or whether the solution is to embrace it, to take control of your own reprogramming, to deliberately modify your own algorithms in pursuit of growth and improvement. This is the question that Turing left us with. This is the question that we must answer for ourselves. The implications of Turing's insight extend far beyond the academic realm of mathematics and computer science. They penetrate into the very fabric of how we understand ourselves as human beings, how we organize our societies, and how we relate to the technologies we create. If the human mind operates according to computational principles, then every aspect of human behavior becomes, in principle, subject to analysis and modification. This is not a comfortable realization. It challenges the romantic notion that human consciousness is somehow exempt from the laws of nature, that there exists within each of us a spark of something transcendent that cannot be reduced to mechanism. But Turing was not interested in comfort. He was interested in truth. And the truth, as he saw it, was that consciousness, like everything else in the universe, operates according to discoverable principles. The question is not whether these principles exist. The question is what we do with this knowledge once we possess it. Consider the modern world in which we live. We are surrounded by systems designed to reprogram our behavior, to shape our preferences, to guide our choices in directions that serve the interests of those who control these systems. Social media algorithms are explicitly designed to modify your attention, to keep you engaged, to make you return again and again. Advertising is a systematic attempt to reprogram your desires, to make you want things you did not previously want, to associate products with emotions and aspirations. Political messaging, whether from governments or corporations or ideological movements, is fundamentally an attempt to reprogram your beliefs, your values, your understanding of what is possible and desirable. Educational systems, for all their noble intentions, are systems for programming minds with knowledge, skills, and ways of thinking. Even our personal relationships involve constant attempts to reprogram each other, to influence each other's behavior, to shape each other's understanding of the world. We are, all of us, constantly being reprogrammed, and most of the time, we do not even notice it happening. But here is the crucial insight that Turing grasped. If we can be reprogrammed by external forces, then we can also reprogram ourselves. This is the liberating flip side of the terrifying realization that our minds are computational systems. It means that you are not trapped by your current programming. It means that you can change. It means that you can deliberately modify your own algorithms, your own patterns of thinking and behavior, in pursuit of goals that you yourself define. This is what we call learning, growth, self-improvement, transformation. Every time you practice a skill, you are reprogramming your neural networks. Every time you meditate, you are modifying the algorithms that govern your attention and emotional responses. Every time you read a book that challenges your assumptions, you are updating your belief systems. Every time you have a conversation that changes your mind, you are rewriting your mental code. The human capacity for self-directed change, for deliberate self-modification, is perhaps the most powerful and most distinctly human capability we possess.